welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the 4 things that are detrimental to relationships and actually can be predictive of divorce. So we're going to talk about what those are, and if you're experiencing them, then what to do about them. If you like videos like this that's talking about relationships and marriages and what to do if you're in a tough spot, then please like this video so that I know that it's something that you like and are interested in, and I can make more of these videos. And don't forget, if you haven't subscribed yet, you can hit that subscription button below for new videos every single week on faith, family, and mental health. I'm trying to get the lighting to be good, and I think it's better this way, so let's leave it the way that it normally is. Okay, so let's jump in. We're going to talk about the 4 things. So these come from Dr. John Gottman. He's a psychologist, and he's been studying marriages and what works and what doesn't work for more than 40 years. And so he's come up with what he's called the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. These are 4 indicators of couples who are heading towards divorce, and why that is and what goes on when those things are present in relationships. He realized that not all negative things in relationships are created equal. So not every single negative thing that ever happens means that you're heading towards a divorce. But there are 4 that are more common in couples that do end up getting divorced. And he went through and did research over time and found that he could predict the success rate of a marriage based on whether these factors were present or not and how often they were present, and if anything was being done about them. Okay, so number 1 is criticism. And what criticism is a general statement about somebody's character or personality. So a general negative statement about who somebody is as a person. It's different from a complaint. We can complain about something and have a legitimate complaint without criticizing the other person. Usually criticisms say, you always, you never. Usually they start out like that. So if you catch yourself saying you always, you never, things like that, then you want to watch how you're saying things, and if you have a complaint about something, you can bring that up without criticizing the other person. For example, let's say there's a husband and a wife, and the husband leaves his clothes everywhere and doesn't put them in the hamper. And so her complaint would be, I would like for you to put your clothes in the hamper instead of leaving them all over the living room floor. That's a legitimate complaint and a concern to bring up to a husband. But a criticism would just be going from that to, you're such a slob, I can't believe you're like that, why are you such a mess? So this went from a complaint about an action or behavior that was happening to a criticism about this person's personality and their character. And so when we get to that point, that's when it becomes really, really harmful. Women tend to do this more often than men do, so if you're a woman and you're watching this, then just pay attention to that criticism, because it can kind of sneak in there, and make sure that you're offering a complaint and a suggestion rather than criticizing their personhood and their character. The second of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse is defensiveness, and this is just the other person defending themselves against what they feel is an attack. So it doesn't actually even have to be a real, legitimate attack, it's just a perceived attack. So if there's so much negativity within the relationship and they feel like they're being attacked, even if maybe the other person doesn't intend on attacking them, then they respond with defensiveness, and that is also really harmful. What happens with defensiveness is that the person is either defending themselves and trying to point out all their good attributes, or they go back and they attack the other person and they just kind of flip it around. That's a form of defensiveness, is counterattacking the other person. And what happens is that they're not taking responsibility. They're either denying or avoiding responsibility for whatever it is that was brought up in the first place. And so that's harmful, because if somebody has a concern about something and it's not being acknowledged, and the other person, so let's take that same example of a wife who is, her complaint is that he's not picking up any of his clothes, and if he just comes back and says, well, what about you? You never take out the garbage, and you never do this, and you never do this. That it never addressed the issue of what was going on, and instead he's defending himself by pointing out her flaws. So that's not helpful, and it's gonna actually lead to a lot of problems later on, if not already. The 3rd horseman of the apocalypse is contempt. Contempt is the killer of relationships, and we'll get back to that. Contempt is a statement or a behavior that puts yourself higher than the other person, and that can look like a few different ways. One thing is by mocking the other person. So sometimes there's teasing in families, and that's not the same thing. Maybe a parent is teasing their child, or the child's teasing their parents, or going back and forth, and everybody's laughing. Both people are laughing, and it's for fun and it's out of love. Mocking is making fun of the other person, imitating the other person in a way that puts them down and tries to make them smaller and less than the person who is doing the mocking. Another way that contempt can come out is in the middle of a really heated argument, one person starts correcting the grammar or correcting something about what is being said from the other person. This actually happens a lot, and it's a way that the person is trying to put themselves above and diminish the intelligence or just make them seem dumber than they are, so they point out flaws in what they're saying or flaws in their intelligence in the middle of an argument. The other thing that Gottman found is that there's actually a universal facial expression of contempt. It has to do with the facial muscles and the position of the eyes and things like that. Gottman found that if a wife's husband was contemptuous and he displayed a certain number of these contemptuous facial expressions, she was more likely to experience infectious illnesses. So physically getting an infectious illness because of the contempt of her husband. On the other side, it didn't work exactly the same. Husbands whose wives were contemptuous didn't necessarily become more sick, but lonely husbands whose wives were contemptuous did get sick more often. Physical illnesses manifested that were connected back to the contempt of their spouses. That's a crazy way that contempt plays a role not only emotionally on the relationship, but also physically on the individuals. The fourth horseman of the apocalypse is stonewalling, and men tend to do this more than women. So like criticism, women tend to do that more than men. With stonewalling, men tend to do this more often. This is just shutting down or withdrawing from the conversation or the interaction. So a lot of times at home, if there's an argument, this might look like leaving the room or leaving the house, storming out, that kind of thing. But also two people can sit next to each other and the other person can still withdraw from that conversation. What that looks like might be there's typical nonverbal cues that we give when we're in conversation with somebody: eye contact, nodding, saying uh-huh, like giving cues that we're listening, we're paying attention, we're engaged in the conversation. When somebody starts to stonewall, all of those things go away. They're looking down, they're looking away. They might glance up every now and then to look at the person, but really their eye contact is not engaged. They're very stiff and they don't vocalize, they don't say much, they don't nod, they don't make any sound in an agreement or disagreement. They just have completely shut down and they're disengaged in the conversation. So after all this, you might be thinking, oh shoot, I do some of these, or my partner does some of these, and does that mean that we're doomed? No, good thing it doesn't mean that you're doomed. But it's good to be aware of. Actually, most couples do 3 of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse in their relationships. So that would be criticism, defensiveness, and stonewalling. The fourth one, contempt, is the biggest killer of relationships and marriages. So over time, in stable, happy, successful marriages, contempt was shown almost not at all. So contempt is a huge red flag in relationships and a huge indicator that that relationship will not be successful. But the other 4 do typically occur at some point in most relationships, even stable and happy relationships. So what's the difference between those relationships that are happy and stable and have criticism, defensiveness, and stonewalling versus the relationships that are headed for divorce? The difference between those two is the amount of repair attempts that are made. And repair can look like almost anything that's a repair attempt. So something that you're attempting to do to repair the conversation or repair the argument or repair what's going on in your relationship. It might be trying to act like your own therapist and pointing out patterns of communication and, okay, this is going on and why do I speak in this way, or why do you speak in this way, and what can we do about it? What can we do to fix this pattern that we have? It can be supporting each other, comforting each other. It can be expressing appreciation for the other person, for the things that they do well, expressing affection to each other. It can be softening complaints. So maybe you came like with a really aggressive complaint and you realized, oh, I could have said that in a better way. Going back and softening the complaint, that can help. So there's so many things that you can do to repair once you realize, okay, I said something that was criticizing my partner, or I was defensive and I should have taken a little bit of responsibility there. Maybe there are things that the other person needs to work on, but now's not the time to bring it up. I need to take responsibility for this part right now, because that's the conversation that we're in. Or if you notice that you're stonewalling, you can always come back from that. So these are things that we can come back from. The repair attempts are the thing that's going to make a difference. Are you attempting to repair the conversation? And are you attempting to repair it often? Are you attempting every time you notice that something is not going as well as it should? Are you attempting to make a repair, or do you just let it get away from you and it's an ongoing pattern that you guys have? I hope this gave you guys a little bit of food for thought, things to think about, things to pay attention to in your relationship. Again, if you notice that things are going on, if you notice that you're a little bit critical, it doesn't mean your relationship is doomed. It means that you might need to make a few more repair attempts and pay attention to that behavior and try to lessen it and try to turn it into complaints instead of criticism. Or if you notice that you're a very defensive person, then taking a little bit more responsibility instead of always deflecting the responsibility or turning it on the other person. There's something that you can do about all of these things. When contempt creeps in, that's when it becomes a more serious issue. But typically, all couples are going to experience the first three, and so that is something that you can really do something about and tackle head on. Once you know about it, and once you know that these are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, we don't want to let these get too far. So we want to be aware of them, and we want to tackle them, and we want to turn them around so that we can end up in that stable, happy marriage that we've always dreamed of. I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did like it, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Bye!